That's it. There we are. Thank you. So hi everyone, and thank you so much for being with us here today. The event is How Agile is Your Business Really? And your presenters are Declan Kavanagh, Director of the Organization Development Tools Institute, or ODTI, and myself, Gail Sturgis, a partner at Talent Align OD. So what do we mean by agility? And this is quite an important distinction to make up front. We're not talking about the different agile methodologies and things like that, that I guess a lot of the rest of the festival is talking about. What we mean is when we say how agile is your organization, we mean how ready is the organization for change? How ready is the organization to absorb the kind of changes happening today in the world so that the changes are readily adopted and sustainable at the end of the day? So I am Gail Sturgis. I'm from Cape Town, South Africa. I'm an IT person by background, been brought up in the IT industry and been in organization development for about 16 years now, specializing in organization design, human capital strategy, performance, and change. I've been in the Agile world now for about 3 years, and I'm a partner at Talent Align OD. Declan, do you want to introduce yourself?
So I'm Declan Kavanagh. Similar to Gail's background, I'm an ICT practitioner, an electronics engineer, and worked in a range of multinationals up to CEO level. I also started, scaled, and sold a software services company back in 2008. My experience at the cold front involves various organization transformations, right sizing, integration following mergers and acquisitions. I've worked on with a range of IT capability maturity models such as the CMMI, the IT capability maturity framework, and on a range of others, as you will see from the presentation. I've been involved in the Agile movement from an ICT perspective for 12 to 15 years, actually, involved in early launch and training and development consulting from a software development perspective, and in more recent years around the broader organization and business capability maturity management. And I'm the managing director of the Organization Development Tools Institute. Back over to you, Jeff.
Okay, next slide. So what I'm going to now ask you to do is please introduce yourselves in the chat box. I'm not going to go through them as you do, but we will look at it going on through the presentation so that we can get to know a little bit about you as well, and especially what your interest is in change and organizational agility. So if you can just type that up into the chat box and we'll keep track of that on the side.
And if you have any questions during the session, enter them in the chat box or any comments, and at the end of the session we'll go through the questions.
Thanks, Miles. So our question is, would you embark on a journey without knowing where you are now, where you want to go, what to expect along the way, what problems are ahead and what problems you need to look to avoid, and some way of knowing how you're keeping on track, how you're keeping online with your plan of the journey, and if not, how you can get back on track again? And the answer to that, of course, is no, we wouldn't normally do this. So let's for a minute imagine that we are going to take a sailing trip around the world. We're not going on these great big fancy boats. We're taking a little sailing ship and we're sailing around the world. So what is it that we need to think about on our journey? First, we need to look at our capabilities. Can we sail? What have we learned? Can we navigate? Do we have a skipper's license, which is necessary for that? Do we know how to cope with different conditions? Do we have the right thing, the right capabilities, the right team around us that can, because we're going to be stuck on this little boat for quite a long time. Do we have the right people around us that can help us to stay on track and build the capability as a whole? Then we need to start preparing. Next slide. Then we need to start preparing. So what kind of vessel is it that we're going to take? How roadworthy is it? How does it need to be geared up for what we want to do? What kind of sails do we need to take? What kind of spare riggings do we need to take? Do we need to take a motor with us? If you're racing, you can't have a motor, but if you're not racing, you can have a motor. So all these things need to be taken into consideration in the preparation. Next one. And only then can you start planning your actual route. And what is important about the route is you need to be in certain places at certain times, otherwise you hit all kinds of weather conditions. So you need to know what the optimum time is to be arriving at and leaving from different destinations on your journey around the world. Then what is it that we need to take with us? Do we need to take enough for now? How we start? Where's the next port of call that we can stock up again? So what are the things that we need to take with us on this first leg of the journey, taking account of anything that might happen on the way? And then we're ready to start going, but in order to get going, we need to monitor our progress. In other words, we need to know, are we on track? Are we where we are supposed to be? Are we likely to land up where we need to be when we need to be? Because if none of those happen, we need to start making other plans. So the monitoring is really important. And of course, how agile are we? Hopefully we don't end up with anything quite as chronic as this picture, but things go wrong along the way. So how ready and how agile can we be on this journey when things go wrong to be able to take the appropriate action and the appropriate interventions that we need to get ourselves back on track again? So what is this to do with business transformation? Next slide. There are many similarities between that and a business transformation. First and foremost, it's not to be taken lightly. Survival, not just the journey, depends on a good plan and careful planning up front, a good understanding of the journey and understanding of the decisions that you need to make before you start and on the journey on its way. A determination of the time frame and the checkpoints and the conditions to expect along the way. All of these are things that you need to take into account in business as well as in our fictitious sailing journey around the world. Next slide. So these are the 6 major transformations that organizations are really facing today. Many organizations started on some of them before COVID, but COVID has certainly accelerated virtually every single one of these different transformations. And all of these journeys need an understanding of how ready the organization is for these changes. You can't just foist these changes on the organization. And so I'm going to now hand over to Declan to take a look at it from a business perspective.
So, when we look at an organization, we're talking about achieving a specific goal. If we look at a current status of any organization, their current capabilities and those maturity levels of those capabilities determine the current performance and the current rate of change. And what we want to do is, looking forward at the business or transformation goals, ensure we have an integrated plan that has us building the right capabilities to the right maturity level so we can achieve our target performance and improve our agility. Improving agility is really important these days, given that there is a high degree of variability and uncertainty in the world, not just with COVID, but we have rapid technology change, we have geopolitical situations, trade barriers, and regulatory changes going on all the time, and you know, some of these come quite quickly, and building agility means building an organization and its systems so that they can respond and not take a long time. So what are capabilities? We use a simple definition that's reasonably well accepted, and it's the ability to mobilize resources to achieve a specific aim. And it's a very general definition, but it applies to organizations' capabilities, a machine's capabilities, a process capabilities. And that's why it's good, because we can deal with the complexity that exists in the system, in the organizations. And they're whether you're looking at a team or a particular function or a particular organization, we have many interrelated activities ongoing, and capability maturity management is a way of simplifying our approach to looking at this complexity and building its capacity to deal with achieving target ambitions, and also building agility. So 70% of all transformations fail, and that's fairly consistent since the 60s, and is reinforced in many different research reports, whether it's from somebody like Burns or McKinsey or any of the major research and advisory firms. You know, 70% plus of all transformations fail. Some examples of the reasons why these failures occur. And it often starts at the top, you know, that the leadership of transformation and change is less than optimum for what the organization requires, or is over ambitious and doesn't reflect, you know, the current situation. And there are many different reasons outlined there, but you know, these can be summarized into, you know, these are all just symptoms of low capability maturity across the organization. And that can be in their human systems, the human policies, or it can be in their operations, or it can be in their strategic perspective of the organization. So, you know, not being ready to manage change is a big challenge for many organizations. And the reason we talk about change capability and agility is that no longer can we talk about change as being an event or a project with a start, a middle, and an end. You know, unfreeze, make the change, refreeze. So we need to build change capability, a system and an organization and teams that can respond to the situation they find tomorrow when they go into work. So I guess we ask another question here, and you know, we would be interested in your experience, and if you type into the chat function any thoughts or sources of problems with change and transformation in organizations that you have seen and you think are important, then it will allow us respond at the end to some of the comments that you made. So how can we help you change that? So in the Organization Development Tools Institute, and in particular, Dr. Miles Sweeney, who's on the call, Dr. Sweeney researched over 15 years why change fails, and why have the existing change management models such as Cotter and Lewin and all these guys, why have they not prevented? They certainly have improved how we understand and manage change, particularly as an event, but they haven't necessarily reduced the level of change failure. And over 15 years, Miles researched and published and brought about new insights in what is described as dynamic systems maturity theory. And then this is a scientific means for understanding how human systems work, and it explains how they function and why they perform at specific levels and the nature of their development and learning process. And it is an extensive body of knowledge that takes us to next generation change management that is equally about building change capability as it is managing specific and individual changes. The body of knowledge has been packaged in a platform consistent in structure and architecture and approach to other capability maturity frameworks. So what we have is the organization capability maturity framework, which is a set of body of knowledge, reference models and tools, and it's based on dynamic systems maturity theory, and it's designed to help organizations build agility, build their change capacity and achieve their aims and ambitions, whether it just be for incremental improvement or a specific change initiative, whether it's restructuring the business to meet the needs of new markets, or whether it's digitally transforming the operations of the business. And there are three reference models. We have the Organization Maturity Index, which is the whole system. It looks at the organization as a whole and covers every capability that an organization requires, and defines for the 7-level maturity scale the traits and development focus for each capability, all 87 capabilities. So building organization agility looks at not just dealing with the human element of building people's skills and competence, but every aspect of the system and all those interrelated items that have an influence on the agility of the system as a whole. We have the Digital Maturity Index, which is an equivalent body of knowledge, but it's focused on digital business transformation. And finally, we have the Team Maturity Index, which focuses on any team, and in particular, in today's environment, we would have the move to hybrid and virtual teams occurring in many organizations. And you can't just assume that an existing team in the traditional office building or factory, when it moves to remote or virtual hybrid working, will just continue to perform as it was. So this is the model that we are using and is getting more and more use around the world to help manage change and to build organization and team agility. So really what we have, if we go back to our analogy, is that the framework of organization capability maturity becomes the business compass and the business roadmaps, similar to the sailing analogy. So what is the Organization Maturity Index? So here we have the architecture of the index, and at the highest level we have the model overall, and the model is a representation of the organization system. And then we have the macro capabilities, which are called dynamics, and these are the forces that influence the functioning level of the system based on dynamic systems maturity theory research, and they're grouped into indices. So we have the productive dynamics, the human dynamics, the directive dynamics, and the macro dynamics. And each of these we can measure the capability, and we can get guidance on what is the appropriate action and step to improve the capability maturity to the next level up. And finally, at the lowest level, we have the micro capabilities that support each of these dynamics, and we call those constructs. So that's a brief overview of the architecture of the Organization Maturity Index. Similarly, we have the Digital Maturity Index, and this index differs from the technology space, and technology management is well served with several very strong models that are capability maturity based, such as the CMMI and the IT Capability Maturity Framework. However, our research and our experience tells us that digital transformation and digital business is more about the organization and business transformation than anything else. And what we have focused on is leveraging the architecture of the model into a similar framework of macro capabilities and micro capabilities. So the Digital Maturity Index focuses on, for example, the digital strategy, the digital workplace, the digital offering, the customer intimacy, the operating model, and the technology. And they are all the key value components to creating successful digital transformation outcomes. And finally, we have the Team Maturity Index. Again, it's a similar structure. Most team development techniques and individual capability development and competence development techniques focus on individual behaviors, and many of the tools are very powerful and very useful in team development, such as Myers-Briggs and Belbin as examples. However, when we look at how teams work, we know that there are three key dynamics. The individual performance, which is about the whole area of the individual's competence and capability, and not just their soft skills and their technical skills. Then we have the team itself. And finally, the organization itself can have a significant influence on how individuals and teams perform. So it's necessary to take on board these three key areas and their detailed development paths to build strong capability and more effective and productive teams, particularly in this new arena of distributed teams, virtual teams, offshore teams. They all need to go through the forming, storming, norming, and performing process. So what do we want to know, and how do we use capability maturity? And this is a visual indicator of how the maturity assessment process works and what the outcome is. And we have the first scenario is, what we have here is we have an organization that has prioritized four key dynamics that they need to work on to achieve their particular business objectives. And we have an initial assessment which gives us the initial starting point of where are they on the maturity scale, the 7-level maturity scale, which is underpinned actually by a 15-level scientific scale based on dynamic systems maturity theory. It's also necessary that they have some clear targets. What level do they need to be at to achieve their business goals and KPIs for the next period? And then to monitor progress as we go through the change process and the day-to-day operational process of delivering on the aims and objectives of the organization. So we can use preparation, we can use a maturity assessment as a means of preparing to start the process. So what's our starting point like? And there are different levels of assessment. We have 3 levels here outlined, and at the need level, the top level is just a single online question and you get a report. And this is often used as the call to action in organizations. draw attention perhaps of everyone to, do we need to do something, and why do we need to do something? The next level of assessment is the triage level, and it is used for a quick fix for identifying priorities and setting the direction and the priorities for capability development and capability management and building. And at the lowest level, we have the more deeper dive into diagnostic, where we get down to looking at each of the constructs. So maturity assessments can be selected on the online platform from a set of standard assessments, or the user can configure the appropriate assessment depending on what their business context is and what their business priorities are. Planning is important, and you know, the reasons we give for and that have been found important from a capability management perspective is, it's like the 6 C's: confirmation, control, consistency, commitment, calibration, and comparison. You know, at the very start, you know, assessment gives us the opportunity to more clearly state what the problem is and make sure that our assumptions are right. Going around to, you know, a consistent approach for people and process across the organization when they look at capability building. I'm not going to go into each one of these, but I will talk a little bit about calibration, the ability to focus on the actions. In the research that Miles did, one of the key findings was that the root cause of most change failures is that the actions taken are beyond the capacity of the organization to take on board. And that means then that though they might be scientifically or theoretically the right actions to take, they're way beyond the capability of the process or the team that they're taking the action on. And therefore the actions are not gaining sustainable traction. So one of the advantages of using a capability maturity model is when we're looking at any specific capability or any team or any organization, we can measure the existing capability maturity and calibrate the change actions to the level of maturity that exists or that is being built through the capability improvement program. This is a kind of a ready reckoner or a matrix that looks at, you know, many of the drivers that we see in the users of the model, and how it maps to the different dimensions, such as innovation, agility, collaboration, culture, and even digital transformation. So understanding where you are and where you want to get to, this little ready reckoner is useful for guiding you. And also on the platform, you get guidance for configuring assessments to address the specific issues. Provisioning. So as an example of the provisioning, you know, what do we need to do? You know, this is a sample of a section of a report that gives you direction and guidance. And for example, if we look at management involvement, it's rated quite high in maturity level. We get a description of the traits, and then we get, for management involvement at a level 6, here's the guidance to move it to the next stage over time. You know, likewise at the lower level, we have the operating model, which is really at a basic mid-level of maturity. And at that level 4, it would suggest that the level of agility in this organization is limited. It's not non-existent, but it's constrained by the type of operation that is more bureaucratic, structured, and policy and procedure driven. And the development focus will give guidance for what do you need to do when you look at your operating model to build it to the next level of maturity. That frees up the organization to become more responsive to dealing with change. Of course, most organizations will have some level of monitoring of key performance indicators, and these are just sample dashboards that will look at key outcomes that an organization aims to achieve, or key levels of activity they must achieve to attain the outcome. But equally as important is understanding, measuring the underlying capabilities that are going to allow us to achieve the key outcomes. And that's what capability maturity assessment brings to the table as one tool or one component of how the organization will manage its change and manage building agility. So likewise, I've probably already covered the fact that at the higher levels, it's not till you reach level 5, the competitive level across the organization or across a team, that you can say you have an agile organization. It's only at the level 5, level 6 and level 7 that the organization has gone through a learning process and has built a level of strength and progressiveness in managing their businesses, their people, their processes, and their tools, including leadership and physical resources. So, critical checkpoints sailing around the world, we want to be in the right place at the right time. And likewise, for business transformation, the organization must have the right level of capability at the right time so that they can execute the actions that are in their plan for change, whether it's introducing a new software system or designing some new product. There will be a certain level of capabilities that will be required to achieve these changes in the plan. So how does it work? One of the things that we often talk to our users and our clients about is the nature of change and the scale of change. And there are different types of change, and we look at these on two axes. One is products and services, and the other is the nature of the product and operational models. And we can see at the top right hand corner, transformational change is significant change. It's going to impact across the whole organization. It may change significantly the business and operating models, and we may not know the exact destination before we start, versus at the other end of the spectrum, where we're looking at how do we continuously maintain, improve incremental improvements, and what capabilities need to be acquired and what's practical. So this is just a nice little reference model for looking at the scale of change and defining a change program and understanding, the scale of change and being able to communicate that to stakeholders. So we talk a lot about maturity levels, and we have a 7-level model. Most maturity models have a 5-level model, and they are descriptive models, and they're largely based on it's easy to deal with 5 levels. However, in the organization capability maturity framework, because it's underpinned by a normative scientific scale, we feel that the 7 levels must be defined, must be understood, and must be known. And at the highest level, you find it's not really covered in the existing maturity models that are out there. This is a normative model, so it can be used to baseline and benchmark. So what we see here is the description of each of the levels at the highest possible level in the organization. And really at the lowest level, we have an organization that's failing, and that may be on a downward spiral. And then at the highest level, we have the innovative, regenerative organization that's continually renewing itself, its market, its services, and finding new ways to spin out and create greater growth and value for their stakeholders. And go around the level 4, the operational level, which is where most organizations actually reside. You know, they tend to be formalized and compliant, and they achieve the average performance. But if you want to achieve, you know, leadership performance in the marketplace, then you've got to be building a high maturity organization. This example of descriptions is there, and you can find these descriptions at every level for every single of the 87 capabilities in the organization. And that forms the basis for our assessment and our development roadmap actions. And just I re-show this, it gives you an idea of what you can aspire to and what you can achieve, you know, from the operational level, or if you have a particular area of the organization that's actually in one of the lower levels, you know, it provides you guidance and a roadmap for fixing the problem and building in a structured process that represents how an organization learns. And just to recap here, we have the 3 levels of assessment, the root cause analysis, diagnostic, the health check, the catalyst. We have this for organization agility in the OMI, for team effectiveness in the team maturity index, and for digital performance in the digital maturity index. And now I'm going to hand back to Gail.
Thank you, Declan. And I'm going to talk very quickly just about the kind of methodology that we follow. You can go to the next slide, Declan. Okay, so this should look fairly familiar to most people because it's very much based on the concept of lean change management. The only thing that we really think is really important is about that whole section at the front. The whole data collection, review results, feeds into insights, creates options. We do the experiments, and then it can feed back just into the insights and options. But sometimes we need to go back, like we do on our compass, and make sure that we're heading in the right direction. We're not just heading in the right direction for now, but for the entire journey. So sometimes we just need to feed back into that initial loop and check the data and check where we are and look for any new data, because this world, as we all know, is changing just too fast for words these days. And so we really do have to keep checking on where we are. So what we would like to do for you is we would like to invite you to have a free assessment. And if you would like to take us up on that, these are our email addresses for Declan, myself. You can contact either of us, and we will be in contact with one another so that you actually get to see and understand yourself what is capable. So we had quite a few things cropping up along the way while you were talking. So Dan asked, how do you explain the difference to an organization between agile and having greater agility? Miles?
Sorry, Gail, what do you want? Hello, Gail?
Yeah?
What do you want?
No, Declan must unmute himself, please. Okay, there we go. Declan, so question number 1, how do you explain the difference to organizations between agile and having greater agility?
Well, agile is a definition of an organization that is able to respond to rapid changes in the environment at any level in the organization, in any part of the organization, and not be diverted from its original path or choose to take a new direction and set new priorities in response to what's happening in the environment without degradation in performance overall or degradation in their ambition. Greater agility is more a statement of, what is your current agility and can you improve your agility? So it's more about related to what your existing agility is. And we can say that at the lower levels of maturity that, if an organization is at level 3, it's constrained, it's not agile. But there may be pockets of responsiveness within the organization. So that organization would be looking to take a series of actions that build their capabilities to the next level, giving them greater agility. So as you go up the model in maturity level, you also grow your agility.
Is that okay, Dan?
Yep, that's great.
Okay, cool, thanks. Carrying Shu says, I find the challenge is the relative proportion of organizations looking just to implement Agile, but not prepared for a more holistic transformation.
It's an interesting, that's an interesting question. Many organizations and many consultants out there, what they do, what they have done when they're looking at building organization or business agility is they've repackaged some of the techniques from the software world, like, stand-up meetings, daily meetings, storyboards, backlog management, and sprints. Those techniques in their own right have some value, and they help facilitate building agility, but alone they do not address the fact that the systems, the processes, the people, and the skills across different functions and different teams may not have the underlying capacity to be responsive in their day-to-day work. So the systemic view, I mean, what would be this model and the research came about from bringing together research in systems theory, psychology, and economics, and it brings together, and Miles would talk about this in greater detail, the theories that are well known and well established into a model that is valid for any human system, whether it's an organization, a person, or an economy. And it stands, it describes in detail, the way we learn and how an organization learns. So it's a systemic approach to it. I have to say, and I should reinforce that tools like these and bodies of knowledge like these, they're just one component of enabling greater agility and enabling change and transformation. There's lots of things are happening, and what this model does is it probably brings a bit of a checklist to the organization as to what are the boxes we need to tick overall to be successful in our change.
And then Rajiv said, I find the challenge is the core or basic cultural differences of people to implement any global strategy to all regions and agility.
That's a very interesting one, and it might be interesting to get Miles's comment on that one so that we can hear from the expert. Miles, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, I did post a little thing I thought on the chat on this. Yes, it is quite culture proof in that respect because it is a normative model. It is based on psychology. It's based on human nature. So effectively, human nature is the same all over the world. The model transforms the idea of understanding culture. Organizational culture, for example, is only understood as basically as the way we do things around here, even though it's cited as the main intrinsic reason for organizational failure and the failure of change. And so we can look at international cultures in the same manner, but the model redefines culture as an habituated stage along the model. So there are the best papers have 10. They've defined 10 different cultures, but they each map onto one of the 15 phases. So again, Declan was talking about how the model brings in psychology models like Freud and Maslow, but it completes them, and it completes also the detailing of different types of culture. So yes, we have a model that is culture proof, but it redefines culture in effect as well.
I think the other thing that we should say, and it's a very interesting question, and it's one of the challenges I've come across many times in my businesses and running businesses. You know the different cultures across the globe working in hybrid and distributed teams. And one of the ways to enable a dialogue and building of a more consistent approach and a greater understanding is that we can do assessments in the various groupings and across groupings, and we can share the findings of those. And it provides the basis for discussion around, one set of the team has a low maturity in a particular, whether it's a technical capability or a human dynamic or a construct under the leadership mode, and the others have high, and it allows for the discussion and the understanding, and at least a move towards more common ground and building the average maturity to a higher level. So just one technique to use.
I'd like to interject that if you are interested in the culture question, I have a paper on my ResearchGate. So if you just Google ResearchGate Miles Sweeney, you'll see that paper, how it describes the redefining of culture.
Sure. Thanks, Declan, and thanks, Miles. I think this gives a right idea of what you are saying. I will possibly look out for that particular paper. And yes, it's a sometimes it becomes a little bit a big resistance towards the changes. We found it, but what both of you spoke out, I absolutely agree with you. Level of dialogues, a level of understanding, a level of rapport building positively help us.
Gail, any further questions?
Yeah, one more question from Kai Wing Chu. We often have leadership denial, expecting that all of the problems and solutions lie within the delivery teams.
That's a very interesting question, and some of it comes about naturally. The board has the chief executives team under huge pressure to grow the revenues, and that bubbles down to unrealistic expectations of what can be achieved from the operating model, and again, it's a way of by introducing some level of understanding of what are the maturities and the capabilities that exist in the delivery system versus the expectations of leadership, and also, you can configure an assessment whereby we look at the directive dynamics, and we also get a measurement of the effectiveness and the maturity level under, the leadership dimension of the organization at all levels, around strategy and goals and capacity management and things like that. So the model can be quite effective in allowing for the discussion and the dialogue, and it moves the discussion away from not just talking about capacity, which is often that discussion in an organization is we don't have enough machines, or we don't have enough people, or we don't have the capacity to build this amount of messages every day, or answer this amount of calls every hour, to discussing, you know, the maturity of the various sub-teams, let's say, you know, because a team is a subsystem, you know, and it might be allow to surface out opportunities for waste elimination, opportunities for introducing lean techniques to increase capacity, opportunities for skill and career development, or introduction of automation, as much as opportunities to discuss around additional investment, whether it's in people or, you know, looking at the leadership structure and the strategy, and having that dialogue and discussion around that part of the organization. I don't know if Miles wants to add anything to that.
Yeah, well, the instructions that are given from the website, you know, moving along the different phases, do start at the very beginning with this kind of disorienting dilemma that has to be initiated by the change agent, and it must really involve the leader, and the leader has to get involved with what's called the critical network. These are the people who show the motivation for change, and they're representative of the different stakeholders from around the organizational system. And without that kind of involvement, change is very difficult. And the kind of instructions show how the leader stays involved with accountability and so on. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's all the questions that we have in the chat box, unless anybody else has another question. Anybody else? Going. Right. Miles, I think you can wrap up.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody, for participating. You can find lots of information on both Gaale's website and the www.orgcmf.com platform. A reminder, we'll probably do a little survey after this to get some feedback on how useful this presentation and discussion was, and how well we've managed it for you. And thank you again for your time today. We will be putting the recording up on a number of websites and probably on YouTube, and we'll send you the links. Thanks again for participating today.
Thank you, everybody.
Really interesting. Thank you.